Good morning. Good morning. Please be seated. Welcome to the Roosevelt Room, and we are just thrilled that this day has come. It is a really important occasion in the Clinton presidency, and we are so delighted to see friends and colleagues who have gathered to recognize this moment. My job is merely to welcome people. That is all that I'm doing, but with great delight because I'm so excited about the announcement that is to come by one of my constituents, I'm happy to add. And now it's my absolute delight to introduce a friend for so many years, someone who is there doing the work of bringing people together literally day in and day out, who is a remarkable person who has such a grounding in what's important and has been heading up the effort in Little Rock and nationally on behalf of the Foundation and the library, and that is our very dear friend, Skip Rutherford.
Thank you, Mrs. Clinton. Thank you for all you do for others, and congratulations on that great win in November. We're really Arkansas has a third senator, too. Secretary Slater, Director Witt, Chelsea, and special guests, on behalf of the Clinton Presidential Foundation Board and members Ann Jordan, Terry McAuliffe, Senator David Pryor, and Cheryl Mills, we're pleased today to participate in this very special occasion. Let me begin by thanking President Clinton for establishing his presidential library and center in Little Rock, Arkansas. He could have selected any of several locations, and he chose Little Rock. Mr. President, this is a wonderful gift to the city and the state, as well as to history, education, and the future. To be located in the William Jefferson Clinton Presidential Park on the banks of the Arkansas River in downtown Little Rock, the Clinton Library will house the largest presidential collection in American history. The complex will also contain a museum, policy center, and the University of Arkansas Clinton School of Public Service. In addition to its valuable archival resources, the Clinton Library represents a significant economic development and tourism commitment. To the best of my knowledge, this $100 million project is the largest single private sector construction project in Little Rock's history. In addition, the library is projected to generate an annual economic benefit of $10.7 million to the city. And even before it's built, it's already encouraging strong economic development. One high-tech company, Axiom, has already broken ground on a 700-job, 12-story complex. And a major international humanitarian organization, the Heifer Project, is developing plans for a global village and international headquarters. Both would be Clinton Center neighbors. And knowing that the Clinton Library will be nearby have been key location factors for both. Unlike many of the other presidential libraries, the Clinton Library will be within walking distance of hotels, including the new Peabody Little Rock, restaurants, other museums, including the old State House, where it all began in 1991, the public library, the state's largest convention center, and a thriving River Market entertainment and retail district. The Clinton Library will be the anchor. In addition, because the site is visible from the state's most heavily traveled section of Interstate Highway and is within minutes of the Little Rock National Airport, it will be user-friendly and easily accessible to local, state, national, and international visitors. Many individuals have worked very hard on this project. I want to recognize and thank two people here today who coordinated the site selection process. Little Rock City Director, Dr. Dean Compuris, and Assistant City Manager, Bruce Moore. They both worked very, very hard. And I also want to personally thank Mac McClarty, Joe Ford, and Jordan Johnson for their help and encouragement along the way. This year is the 200th birthday of the White House. In 1900, William McKinley became the first president ever to ride in an automobile. Teddy Roosevelt, I'm told, was the first president ever to leave American soil. When President Clinton entered office, the World Wide Web was a scientific research tool. Today, over 300 million people worldwide are online. And the technology possibilities for the Clinton Library are endless. Innovative and interactive technology, along with long-distance learning and research, will be key components in the first presidential library of the 21st century. But in addition to the future, the Clinton Library makes a very important statement about the past and about historic preservation. A train depot built in 1899 will be restored and used for the Clinton School. In honoring the request of local officials, a railway bridge will be restored and be converted into a pedestrian bridge across the Arkansas River, linking Little Rock and North Little Rock, enhancing the city park and making the region's new 18,000-seat Alltel Arena even more accessible. Of the first 30 American presidents, only a few made specific bequests to their papers. Unfortunately, Presidents Van Buren, Garfield, Arthur, Grant, Pierce, and Coolidge lost significant numbers of theirs. But in 1939, Franklin D. Roosevelt established the Presidential Library System. Since then, not only have records been preserved and protected, it's been said that each presidential library is a classroom of democracy and a vital link on a continuous journey through American and world history. What began in Hyde Park, New York, and later in West Branch, Iowa, Independence, Missouri, Abilene, Kansas, Boston, Massachusetts, Austin, Texas, Yorba Linda, California, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Atlanta, Georgia, Simi Valley, California, and College Station, Texas. That continuous journey now makes its way to Little Rock, Arkansas. And again, Mr. President, we thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you the lead architect for this project. Jim Polshak, Richard Olcott, and the Polshak Partnership team have designed some of the most well-known facilities in the world, including most recently the highly acclaimed Hayden Planetarium. They have been and continue to be a pleasure to work with on this library project. Please welcome Mr. Jim Polshak.
Thank you, Skip. I have a lot to thank Skip for. He's the most energetic and optimistic guy and has the shortest conversations on the telephone of anybody I've ever talked to. And you can't win with him. If it isn't Terry, it's Skip. It's the same line. And I also want to thank the First Lady, who I am absolutely ecstatic is going to represent me and my family and all of the folks from my state. But the great part of it is I'm an Ohioan, and that's right in the middle. Now, actually, I'm a New Yorker, but Senator Clinton is going to make that connection between Little Rock and New York City, and it's going to be a spectacular benefit to all of us and to the entire country. So I'm very happy for that. It is very rare, it's not rare, it never happens, that an architect can unveil a project of this scope, of this optimistic an outlook, and to do it in the presence of I almost said the donors, in the presence of the patrons, of the clients that have had the vision to conceive it, the persistence to keep at it, and that is, of course, the President and the First Lady. And I'll get back to that in a moment. But you're the ones that have made it possible. And Skip, you did such a great job that I'm going to be able to be very, very brief indeed. Richard Olcott, my younger partner, is here, and I wanted to introduce him. And that's actually very important because I know that part of the reason we were selected was the desire on the part of the President that the team that designed this building should represent two generations, not just one, and that it represents going on. And that is the way it has been and will continue to be. Ralph Applebaum, who is the interpretive designer, who will design the exhibits and is responsible for gathering the oral histories and information that will become a permanent part of the museum, could not be here today, and I apologize on his behalf. The two drawings behind me, the site that you see here, if it only looked like that, actually, it's an unbelievable mess. The wonders of digital copying of photographs cleaned it up. It's kind of been cosmetically, we didn't improve it, but there it is. But this is the train station right here, and this is the Rock Island Bridge that took trains and dropped people off here and vice versa to that station. But it is a site that is decayed, the edge of the river is eroded, and it is an important, critical part of this project, and what it's giving back to the state of Arkansas and the people of Little Rock, if not the nation, is the restoration of that site and its rebirth into a public city park. That has been a fundamental issue. This library actually creates a completely, absolutely unprecedented new model for presidential libraries. There is nothing. We have visited almost every library, presidential library in the country, and the president's discussed them with us. And we didn't be different. It isn't different just for the sake of different. It's different for a very different reason. It reflects the absolutely profound social and technological revolution that has taken place in the last 8 years during this presidency. And it will reflect in rather specific ways the values and the beliefs and the aspirations and the programs of the administration. To that extent, there are 5 of many policy initiatives we could have picked, but there are 5 that have been very important specifically in the design, and I'll go through them very briefly. Human and civil rights. The openness and the physical and intellectual accessibility of the building represent that. Sustainability. It will be a national model of the conservation of energy and natural resources, of sustainable design, and of the reinforcement of the natural landscape, part of which will be to actually ecologically restore the edge of the river to the way it would have been 1,000 years ago. Next is education. We've created spaces both inside and outside, spaces for forums internally, spaces for gatherings and amphitheatrical events outdoors that will facilitate intellectual exchange through the advanced applications of information technology and allow those exchanges, particularly those amongst diplomats, heads of state, important political figures from around the world and around the country, to be shared with everybody via the internet and via television. The fourth is health care, which is, you'd say, is a little bit of a stretch, but in a way it isn't. The creation of the park, of outdoor spaces for contemplation and for recreation speaks to that. And finally, historic preservation. Choctaw Station, which you see here, which is on the National Trust for Historic Preservation, will be restored and will be occupied by the University of Arkansas Clinton School of Public Service. The bridge, which from the very beginning, the minute that Richard and I came out here and saw that bridge, the light bulb went off. It speaks to, we know it is a bridge to the 21st and 22nd century, but it speaks also to the human connection between North Little Rock and this site. And I had some very interesting talk with the mayor of North Little Rock earlier today about a nature center that might take place on the other side. So that's a very, very important issue. Every public building has to give something back. It's not enough just to satisfy the needs of the Clinton Presidential Center, though obviously that is the first thing on our agenda. It has to give something back to its community, and this does. This 27-acre park, the bridge, the repair of the river edge, the preservation of the building, these are things that will forever speak to that. Now, to achieve those ends, I guess not a big room, you can hear me over here. To achieve those ends, what have we done? Well, inspired by the purity and the efficiency of the structure of the bridge, and by the site, which faces due west and looks at downtown, and looks across at the river to North Little Rock that you see here, and that we had in the program an archive for some I think it is 40 million pieces of paper or 80 million pieces of paper. It's an enormous amount. It's the largest collection of presidential documents. 40, 80. It's a,
You see by the phone conversation with George.
80, 80, 80. Architects do those things occasionally. The protection of those pieces of paper, the protection of almost 50,000 presidential artifacts that were gifts during the 8 years will take place in a building which environmentally sits actually into the ground for its protection, is available and protected from behind, meets the standards of the National Archives and Records Administration with respect to security perimeter protection, and is a kind of anonymous shield between the service part of the site and the public part of the site. The station I mentioned before. Connected to the archive building is another small glass box for scholars. It will look on a scholar's garden, small formal garden that is between this and the Choctaw Station. Doesn't show up in this drawing. And finally, an enormous number of people are going to visit this. It is the most accessible of all presidential libraries. We have visited all of them, and even the Kennedy Library, you'd say it's in Boston, well, it might as well be in Timbuktu as far as getting there is concerned. The president said once it was very easy for him, he just flew in there. But that wasn't open to me. It lies at the end of an axis, which is the termination of Markham Street. And you actually enter the site under a portal formed by probably the biggest and largest interstate highway to enter into Little Rock, right over here. That axis terminates in what we have been calling a celebration circle. It allows for close vehicular access, so on some of those 110-degree days that happen occasionally, elderly folks and people with young children can actually get off and get into the air conditioning easily. But it also, with its fountains and its landscaping, is a place for literally for celebrations and for outdoor events for the city and those in conjunction with this. Upon entering this, and maybe it's the single most important thing that we've done conceptually, we have actually elevated the entire building off the ground. We have made it very long and very thin. There will barely be a shadow. North is across the river, so in the afternoon the western sun will glance into here. It is being taken care of by a series of very sophisticated environmental screens. The building, as it's raised, actually has an old-fashioned veranda, something that is known and traditional in Arkansas and many other kinds of similar old antique architecture in that area, so that people can actually promenade on the outside parallel to the inside here. It's as high as almost 50 feet off the ground at one point, tapering to about 30 feet. At the base of the building, sitting on top of it is a place for orientation, a cafe, gift shop, and that sort of thing. The cafe actually gives onto a bosque of trees here for outdoor dining in the shade, right with Choctaw at the background, the building here. There's a place for tour buses and so forth to come in and unload people. They can come in a different way. On the top is a conference center and presidential residence with a roof garden that you can see, and I have to tell you now that all of this is still very preliminary. Subject to obvious change as we begin to work in more detail with the president and his representatives. But it's not far off. There are two pieces in here. If you'll see at the top, you'll notice an oval. The oval is not an accident. The oval sits on a stack of ovals, the most important of which is an exact reproduction of the Oval Office. And it was a concern of the president's that it should have the quality of light that is flowing into that office today. And we are still working to and hope to be able to demonstrate that that in fact is possible. Above that oval, below that oval, there is an orientation theater which can open to a great hall to be used in conjunction with it, or that you will rise to on escalators and elevators for the introductory film that will be made to the library. From that, you go on into the exhibits. The Great Hall has a 40-foot ceiling. You can have dinners there for 400 or more people. It can be rearranged for symposia, for council meetings, for a whole variety of events there. It will be screened, though the light will come in from this wall. It will be screened from the view here, blocking forever a view of some newspaper that sits over there. I always say one thing I shouldn't. That oval then continues on up and penetrates as a wonderful conference room or a place for large dinners at the roof level, surrounded by roof gardens and so forth. It's all serviced by pantries and so forth, which are in the back. The exhibit, which Ralph and ourselves have worked on and have gotten to a certain point, at least spatially, is made as you get up to that third level. There is a sky lobby. From that sky lobby, you're exactly on axis with Markham. You look due east all the way down the Arkansas River. You look due west at downtown and a walkway which will be developed along the river's edge. You then actually go up from the theater to that upper level, and there are a series of platforms that begin to step down very gently. And those platforms trace, in a way which I will not go into detail today, the history of the 32 seasons of the 8 years of the administration and all of its various programs and initiatives. And when you get to the end, the view begins to open up more and more. And when you get to the end, you go downstairs into a 40-foot room with a balcony outside, cantilevered, around 90 feet or so, over the river. In that room will be displayed a selection of the gifts of state and other gifts that are selected by the President and the First Lady to be displayed there. Some, I'm sure, will be enclosed in darkness because they will be made of fragile materials. Others will not. It is a place to inhale, and from that you go down into that room, and then you return either on the outside along the walkway or inside on a series of exhibits that will relate to the policy initiatives that will be taking place in the School of Public Policy here. Again, to this point, and of course down and past the ubiquitous gift shop, which is a necessity here. I said that for Terry. So that's a very brief, probably perhaps a too brief description of it. I did want to say one thing that Ralph had written up and given to us because he couldn't be here, that the exhibition will use the latest digital technologies to create an immersive and media-based program that will convey the day-to-day work of the Clinton administration and its significant impact on the lives of people here and around the world. The museum will present the first substantive telling of this story, drawing on this vast collection of primary material. These are the 40 million, now 80 million physical documents I referred to. And it'll be the first presidential library actually to be actively linked to a public policy center. That is something that's absolutely unique here. So it is the William J. Clinton Presidential Center. It reaches out for the other side of the river. It reaches back to the university and learning. It reaches back and connects to the city of downtown. I have goose pimples as I say these things. I couldn't be more pleased. None of this. We wouldn't be here today. We would not have been awarded this extraordinarily celebratory and honorific commission except for our client, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. I want to begin by saying how glad I am to see all of you here. I want to thank my two Arkansas cabinet members, Rodney Slater and James Lee Witt, for being here, and thank you, Skip Rutherford, for all the work you've done. And I want to thank the other Arkansans here who've tried to help us get this off the ground, including Mac McClarty and Joe Ford and all the local officials. And I want to say a special word of appreciation, obviously, to Jim Polchak and all the people in the architectural firm who worked on this, and to Ralph Applebaum, who is not here today, but I will say a few more words about why that's important. I want to thank Hillary and Chelsea, who have spent a lot of time on this, working with me, trying to imagine what we wanted to do and how we wanted to do it. And I want to thank Terry McAuliffe, who's sitting here trying to make sure we can pay for it as Jim reels off all these things we're going to do. Since President Roosevelt started a presidential library, and he had the only presidential library actually where the president worked in the library while he was president, because he built it in 1939 and he actually used it whenever he went home to Hyde Park until his death in 1945. There have been 10 presidential libraries. I have actually visited 7 of them myself. And I've looked at the plans and the scheme and of the other 3. And I've tried to lift some of their best ideas in this building. But basically what I wanted to do was to, first of all, have a building that was beautiful and architecturally significant that people would want to walk in 100 years from now. But one that would also would work for average citizens. 90% of the people who come to presidential libraries are people who come as visitors. They want to see the museum. They want to know what happened in this point in our history, how it related to everything else, and how it relates to the present and the future. And the challenge for any architect is that you got to protect all these documents. And they have to be in buildings that don't get overly exposed to the light. So if you put all that stuff in one building, you have to have a lot of solid walls. And so the thing that we were able to work out that I'm really pleased about is we're protecting all the documents in the back there, and we don't have to worry about that interfering with the enjoyment of the people who actually come to see the museum and the building and participate in all of that. And so I think that's really the thing that will make it fundamentally more interesting and more enjoyable for all the people. Plus the fact that we, thanks to the good people of Little Rock, we've got enough land here to have a park which will always be accessible to the local citizens as well as to all the visitors. And I'm very, very pleased about that. I also want to say that it was very important to me to try to faithfully present the history of this time. And I want to say a special word of appreciation to Ralph Applebaum. Some of you know he did the Holocaust Museum here in Washington, which I think is the finest museum of its kind anywhere in the world. And I was elated when he agreed to do this. I also want to say, since we'll be living in New York, I think that the planetarium that's been done in Manhattan by the Polchek firm, which some of you have seen pictures of, is basically this great square building in steel and glass with the globe inside. It's just breathtaking, and I knew that when I saw that they could do what I wanted to do down here, and so I'm very, very pleased. Skip has already talked about this, but I wanted this library to also benefit the city and the state. And I think recovering this portion of the river, recovering this part of the neighborhood, you can't tell here, but those of you who aren't from Arkansas don't know, but once you get down here, over here, you're immediately into perhaps the most historic part of our state, the old state capitol, which is mentioned, where I announced for president and where I had my very first reception as a public official in January of 1977 in an ice storm, was built during the period in which we became a state, from 1833 to 1836, and it's a wonderful, wonderful old building. And it was very close to this present state capitol and a lot of other very historically significant buildings, including the magnificent new library we have there. So I'm very pleased about it. I'm very pleased that the library will be accessible and interactive. You know, because of technology, you don't really have to go any place anymore to get whatever is there. And we were laughing about all these tens of millions of documents. The people who work here at the White House, who are part of the permanent staff, who work from administration to administration and preserve these documents. One of the things that I went over to visit them not very long ago, and they showed me what they're doing, and it's amazing. People will, this may be somewhat embarrassing for me, but people have actually been able to pull up on the internet copies of actual memos that I wrote on, and the woman said the reason we got to have so many documents here is that you wrote more letters, more notes to your staff on more pieces of paper than any president in history. And unfortunately, most of them are unreadable, but at least the people will be able to get a picture of that. You'll be able to see, you know, in drafts of the inaugural addresses and what things that, you know, what I wrote and what they wrote. And that's good because it'll let a lot of my speechwriters off in history. People will think, gosh, what he marked out was better than what he said. But anyway, all that will be available, and I think that's very important. The third thing I would like to say is that I really wanted the relationship that this library would have to the University of Arkansas to be focused on public service. I want more and more people to want to go into public service. And we are going to offer a master's degree in public service. But in addition to that, I'm going to attempt to set up partnerships with employers all across America to get them to come and send their young executives to our place for a couple of months as a kind of an orientation in preparation for doing a year of public service in the national, state, or local governments all across the country. I got this idea just basically from the presidential fellowship program we have here. But I can tell you that all the people who come here as White House Fellows make an incredibly unique contribution, as do all the volunteers, all the interns, everybody who works here. And it changes them forever, but they also help us do what we're doing here. And it occurred to me that if we had a critical mass of people all across the United States who were out there working in businesses of all kinds and nonprofits and whatever, but they had spent at least 1 year of their lives working in the public sector at the federal, state, or local level, that number one, the government would always work better, would always have a sense of how whatever is being done affects people who are not in government. But secondly, we would not ever return to a period where the American people felt as alienated from their government as we did for, in my judgment, too many years in the latter part of the 20th century. And I really think it could, if we can get enough people to do this, it could pretty much permanently change the relationship for the American people to the way the government works in a way that would have the government making better decisions and also having more people in the private sector who actually had the experience of being there. So I'm very, very hopeful about it. In 1941, President Roosevelt's library was dedicated. And he said, and I quote, that building a library is really an act of faith, a belief in the capacity of a nation's people so to learn from the past that they can gain in judgment in creating their own future. Well, this is a similar act of faith. And I hope that it will not only allow people to see these remarkable 8 years, but will help to empower people and give them the confidence to believe that they can build America's greatest days in the new century. So again, I want to thank you all, and especially I want to thank those who have helped me to develop these plans, and I want to thank Terry and all the others here who have agreed to help me figure out how to build it, which is now the next big challenge, but I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's okay. Thank you. Thank you.